introduce Jenny Winters to you. Jenny is from the ROE in Lake County. She works with 45 districts, which is 265 schools in Lake County. She works to improve their curriculum, the instruction, and assessment strategies. And some of her areas of expertise, obviously, are Common Core state standards, RTI, formative assessment, and academic vocabulary, which I think is one that we haven't talked much about. She's also working on the ISBE model NAF curriculum, grades 6-12, and next week we'll be working on the K-5 model and model assessments. She's also, as she has mentioned, the Park Core Leaders Group as an item reviewer, but she's not allowed to talk about it. It's more into secrecy. So I'm happy to, so I'm happy to introduce you to Jenny.
So I thought we'd walk through just some basics to make sure we're all on the same page, but it sounds like we are all on the same page. So I might go through some of this quickly.
I think you have to get it in the slideshow.
I have to get in slideshow mode.
Can someone do that, or I can put the...
Is it on the side toolbar or no?
No.
It's not showing up.
Just got here.
All right, I can put on, I'll put this on.
Oh, I think I have a clicker too. Wait, I have a clicker probably.
Yeah, that's
It's
all,
a
I was
web
just gonna
app.
put in
Why
as
is
a
it a
clicker.
web app?
Oh, okay, I'll use your
You're
clicker.
more using your clicker.
I can use your clicker. I clicker that.
It's a website,
Yeah.
so you can't.
Generally, it's this button.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not
So
that
that's
web.
why.
Oh, that's
It's
weird.
like,
Okay, so my thought is we're going to talk about the types of change that you're going through, which is quick. We'll talk about those key shifts and kind of how you're doing with those, because it sounds like you're in the midst of it, so I'm not going to do it at an intro level. The different types of standards and how we know which ones are which. A little bit about PARC, because we're always curious about it, and how that fits in with the different modalities that we're using. How PARC is using those modalities is going to be interesting. Norm Web's depth of knowledge is another piece I think we kind of want to get into, because that's usually we're used to Bloom's. Norm Web is very similar, but I think that's kind of a key piece for us to pay attention to. Different types of assessment that we can be going through, and then I do want to get into those problem-solving structures, because I think that's one of the huge changes that's happening at the elementary that will impact 6-12. So, and then I want to give you some time for Q&A. Sounds like a plan? We're good with this? Okay. So, first thing I think we need to get into is what has to change? What are the changes we're going through? There's 3 basic changes that we're going to have. First of all, we've got assessment change. PARC is changing. Now, we don't have a ton of control over that because PARC is changing it. But we do have control over our classroom assessment and the formative assessments that we create and the summative assessments that we create at the local level. But we want those to mirror PARC in some ways. So we're really, I know everybody's anxious to see what is PARC doing so that we can mirror it. I think what's good is ISBE has a group meeting next week to develop. We're going to start with assessment samples, because I don't know that people are as stressed about lesson design once they see the assessments. I think the lessons come easily once you know what assessment could look like. So I think my goal, and I'm hoping the group agrees with me when we meet next week, is we're going to start with Unit 1 of every grade level and make kind of an assessment picture of what, like the photo album. Not just one picture, but the whole photo album. How do we assess this unit? And what are all the different snapshots we might take that would fully assess this unit? If we can do that, or at least some of the key ones, I don't think that there's different types of assessment, and I think that the conceptual assessments are challenging. I think that the application, the rich task assessments are a little more challenging. Procedural assessments, we've totally got down, because that's what our books have. So I don't know that we need to create samples of those. I think we just need more examples of conceptual application assessments, but we'll get into that. So assessment change is one of those big changes. I hope that the ISBE model items will be helpful, and that's why we're doing that first. Well, I'm pretty sure everybody who's on the committee is going to agree with that, because I'll talk them into it if they don't, but I think that they will. The second type of change we're looking at is that curriculum change. And no textbook is written to the Common Core. Nothing that's out. No matter how much they slap Common Core on the cover, they haven't had time to do that. We're not saying that they're doing a bad job, but it takes time to do that kind of work. all of the publishers are admitting, pretty honestly actually to, off the record, that they have the next best thing in development. So there's nothing to buy right now. That being said, if you've got something that's, 14 years old, there's not much to save from it either. It depends on what it is. But some of the textbooks we look at, we salvage what we can and we create as we go. We all know that. But curriculum, what we try to do with the ISB model curriculum is say, here's a framework that you can align your resources to that's based on the standards. And that's kind of how I would go. We have districts that are taking their texts and going through and saying lesson by lesson, what standard is this? Is it conceptual, procedural, or application level? Which unit would it match up with? Where would it fit in? Would I have to do something before I do the work in the page, or is it good as it is, kind of thing? That's kind of the way we're working. And there's a lot we're cutting. Even though there are Common Core versions of books out there, they still didn't cut enough. And I also think that they didn't add enough conceptual work. I think we're still in a really big hurry to get to procedural, and we're skipping over conceptual. That's really impacting our instructional change. The writers said to us, start here. Start with instructional change. All the trainings I did the first year out were all about instruction. The Common Core trainers and trainers were all about instruction. And what our curriculum directors and our principals were saying when we got them together is, you did all that training on instructional change and it's not changing. And I said, well, that's probably because you're tied to an out-of-date curriculum and out-of-date assessments. So until you took things off the plate, there wasn't time for the instruction to change. And that's why I'm really happy that the ISB model curriculum is out, because we have a tool. You don't have to use it as is, but you have something to start with that could help with changing curriculum and saying, cut this. Now there is content that is shifting up. Not really much from the middle school going up, but a little bit is going up. A lot of it is going up from the elementary grades. Anything that is shifting up, we let it go. It's gone. It's somebody else's problem to worry about that, because it's going up. But content that's shifted down, which a lot of your content that has left your plate has actually gone down, you can't let go of it if they don't have it. And that's where I think this conversation about acceleration comes into play. Accelerating by changing the name of the course, or by saying, now we're going to do the high school level course as it is, that's not fair to kids because they may not have that background. So I think that's a key piece to keep in mind. What is the current level of that course? Let's see which standards that's matching up to. What are they going to be ready for? Not, okay, well, they've always done the high school year 1 course, so we're going to say that they're going to do the high school year 1 course. That's not a fair thing to do to kids who are going to not be ready. And we have a new definition of rigor. Rigor is not just faster anymore. So we want to be really cautious that acceleration doesn't, cause us to hit the wall, which basically it can easily do. So those 3 types of change, I think, are what we're dealing with right now. But the 3 shifts, the first one is probably the most important one, that we're saying we're going to focus, which means when we let things leave the plate, when we let go of content, we say somebody else is taking care of that, we're focusing on these topics. I think that the PARCC framework was very helpful in that it classified the green, the yellow, the blue as, these are the major topics, the major clusters, the supporting clusters and the additional clusters.
Is everyone familiar with the green, the yellow, the blue?
Yes.
Yeah. No.
Okay, so what they said was the majority of your time is supposed to be spent on the green topics. And in the PARCC framework, they actually color-coded and said, these are the green topics per course. Now, you're at the high school level. It depends on which pathway. Are you guys going integrated? Oh, good for you.
Yay.
I'm so glad. I thought I knew that, because Mary is your, yeah, because she's going integrated. So we talked about that. I think that with the integrated course, you'll go through Math 1, Math 2, Math 3, and they've color-coded it by course. So you can see which topics are green. But then when you look at the ISBE model curriculum, we color-code everything too, based off of that. So that's one of the things just a reminder, this is a green topic, you're going to spend more time on it. This is a yellow topic, you're not going to spend much time on it, because it's a supporting topic, or it's an additional topic. So the yellow and the blue really are there to support the green. The green are ongoing, they come up over and over and over again. The yellow and the blue, they're there to enhance your study of the green. or to kind of wrap up your study of the green from the previous year to kind of finalize something. So that focus piece is really important for us. We want our lessons to be focused, we want our units to be focused, where we're not doing a lot of extraneous information, that, you know, or extraneous activities that don't relate to the core topics. The second big change is that idea of coherence, and I think that's where the definition of rigor and the definition of coherence really dovetail into each other. Coherence is helping us to think about the flow from one grade or course to the next grade or course to the next grade or course. And so we see that building, and that's what worries me a lot about acceleration, is that if we try to do acceleration the way we used to do it, it's not coherent. There's a guy who did, from Michigan State, who did a study of how the Common Core standards will impact, Wilfred Schmidt. He was actually on the National Math Panel. He released some information that was kind of interesting. It's on the Achieve website, his PowerPoint, which talks about how well different states' standards align to the Common Core, how close they were. Illinois are not closely matched.
Shocker.
Doesn't shock you. They were not. They are now because we are Common Core. They also looked at our level of coherence. Illinois' standards were not as coherent as some states. They just weren't. So there was a lot, because there was a lack of focus in the Illinois standards. We had many things addressed every year, and then there really wasn't a sense of coherence where it built upon. So moving to the Common Core for Illinois is a really good move. We were in bad shape, which is why our data is showing that. We're in bad shape in lots of ways, but that's what's definitely, our standards didn't help. So, and you know, it was a first stab at standards we were ready to redo actually when the Common Core movement started. So I think the timing was just the perfect storm. You make a first stab at something and you do the best you can, and they learned from that. So I think they recognized that the Common Core was definitely going to be better. Rigor is a new definition. Now it's a definition of the balances conceptual and procedural and application level expectations. That wasn't our definition of rigor in the past. Our definition used to be, we're going to get them through Algebra 1 content in 7th grade. That's really rigorous, you know, and it's fast, but it's not deep. Where this is deep now, because we're saying everything you do, eventually you're going to take it to the real world connection level. I think 7th grade is probably the most real world connected level, you know, of everybody, because everything they do, eventually they solve problems about it. They're you know, it's just, they're the problem solving people. So rigor is that balance of concepts, procedures, and application. But the key thing is that they're saying you really do have to have time for all three. That one is not more important than the other, but there is a flow to them. Okay, so the concepts, they don't just teach us how to get the answer, which is the procedure. They're teaching you why your answer is right. Okay, so they're saying that we want them to learn math as why it works and understand it deeply. And this all looks familiar, right? You knew this.
Oh, yes.
I think the key piece to this is that concepts come before procedures and applications. If you don't have the concept, you don't move on to the next layer. And we are trying to look at our assessments that way now, through that lens of conceptual assessment, procedural assessment, and application. So what we build next week, we're going to build using a framework that these expectations, if this is a conceptual expectation, we want the assessment to be conceptual, using multiple modes of representation. I don't want to assess a conceptual expectation with only one mode of representation. That's not conceptual, that's procedural. So that's a challenge, and I've noticed it's a challenge when we look at the PARCC items. That they're trying to incorporate click and drag and build kinds of questions, but you can't do it on a multiple guess kind of question. So that's where I think they're challenged electronically. I think that what we see in PARCC is a good first stab at it all. But I think our classroom assessments are going to be more heavily based on observation because they're going to be more conceptual. Well, you know, you see it and you listen to them and you know they've got the concept. And I think observation is a valid form of assessment if you know what you're looking for and you're listening for. If you don't know what you're looking for and listening for, it's not valid because you don't even know what you're doing. And that's why we're trying to look at observational checklists as part of our tasks. So we have that idea of what is the key piece that we're looking for. The standards for fluency are looking at that idea of fast and accurate calculation, but it's not just calculation. You can do a lot of things fluently. You can graph fluently. You can make a table fluently. You can make a diagram fluently. So I think we're not just looking at fluent calculation, we're looking at fluent application of tools, application of strategies. I love the fact that they have required fluencies and you have a clear progression of what is expected. So by the time they're done with 6th grade, they should be good to go with their calculations, right? They should be fluent in all their multi-digit arithmetic, add, subtract, multiply, divide, fractions, decimals, work with percents, work with proportions. I'm sure you love this idea too. As they move into the middle school and high school, and they can do all those things efficiently, it's like a dream come true, right? We'll get there. I think it's going to take a little while though, because what we see is a lot of times kids have fluency issues, and we address that with fluency practice. And really, it comes down to a conceptual deficit. So we can't fix procedural skill and fluency issues if they don't have the concept. It's not really a procedural issue, it's more of a conceptual concept, a conceptual gap. What we're noticing is that most RTI programs that come out or interventions, they're procedural fluency based. And there are some that address concepts. Those are the ones we really want to zero in on. Because most kids who are lacking something, it's a lack of experience at the conceptual level, not a lack of experience at the procedural level. Sometimes it is. Sometimes memory is an issue. Sometimes they confuse the process. But those are easier to fix than conceptual issues. And then the last piece is this application one. These are the best kinds of things. This is the rich task where we're seeing that they can use concepts and procedures in a real world context. That's the point of it all, that they can connect it. Now it looks different from K to 5 to 6 to 8 to high school. But we're noticing that this is where the other subject areas really come into play, where statistics in social studies or in science, really we see the rubber hit the road when they're looking at measurement conversion in science, and they're seeing the connection that they've got those skills from math and those concepts from math that they can apply in those other content areas. So we see the other subjects being able to support the application of math. What is a challenge sometimes is that those other subjects don't know the progression. So that's part of what we need to be communicating with our colleagues, is the reason why they're not making those measurement conversions efficiently is because they're lacking something from 4th and 5th grade. So we need to plug that hole. But that's an earlier skill than our level. We're not teaching that, but we need to plug some of those holes. They don't realize some of those things, so we'll have to help them with that. The other thing that we are noticing is that there's been a lot of debate about what reasoning is abstract. Who's ready to handle abstract reasoning? And I think that there's different layers of application. There's application of math to the world, and there's application of math to math. And what we're noticing is that the type of abstraction, when they say kids can't handle abstract reasoning until they're at like the high school level, that's that theoretical abstraction that kids are not ready for. But the practical abstraction of understanding what the symbols mean and the symbols represent real world situations, that layer of abstraction is appropriate for the elementary level. But the theoretical abstract reasoning doesn't take place until, and that's the way the standards are built as well, that they're not really asked to think at that layer of abstraction until the high school standards and beyond, the plus level standards they go. So I think when we look at application, it does evolve from K to 5 to 6 to 8 to high school because we're looking at different types of application. But application is really that idea of seeing how math and the world relate to each other. And sometimes it gets to that theoretical of how math relates to higher levels of math, theoretical, proof kinds of reasoning. Does that make sense? I think that this is the type of assessment that really gets at, like, can you bring it all together? And what we see is that's the extended response type question. Only on PARCC, the extended responses are kind of on steroids, where they're much richer. I've seen some really good sample items